was to find moments of joy. Did anyone do that? Was anyone able to find moments of joy?
Yes.
So it was listening to a piece of favourite music, looking at a beautiful painting, watching the sunset, having a coffee with a friend, Cassandra, you did that, laughing, watching a silly YouTube video. Can anyone share something that they might have done over the last month that represents that for us, that moment of joy?
I've had two moments over the last two days with classes where we've just actually had a really nice laugh. And we've gotten to the point where I've known them enough to have that really lovely dynamic where you can just laugh at ourselves, and I just let there be a bit of time for a bit of humour.
Yes.
I don't know if that's relevant for that, but it was just a nice little bonding moment with two separate classes, and it was nice.
So I think what I'm after here though is a more deliberate searching for joy. So yours was incidental perhaps through your your lovely classroom manner, but I'm actually talking about moments where you can bring it into your day in some way. Take the time to do that. Have you got something, Kate?
I came home and I was really tired last night. I didn't have a lot of energy. Thursday nights I'm pretty low on energy.
Yeah.
And I was aware that there are certain demands that come in the household when you come home.
Yes.
So generally things hadn't been met, needs had been met, but I took myself, I just needed some time to read it, and I listened to some music. I just took myself a reading. I just took 20 minutes to just do nothing. Close the door, and I was just it's football and dinners and nothing about it. I just needed a little bit of time to get myself back together, to go again, to just there's joy, those things when you can just be calm and still and re-energize. And I just knew I needed to, but music often gives me that, just that opportunity to still get, beautiful classical music.
Absolutely.
So I needed that.
Yeah, very good. Yes. Yeah, music can do that. I do the opposite to classical, so some. So I often find that if I've had a day that is intense, then I find that classical music often intensifies that feeling of intensity. So I have a favourite. Getting energised piece of music, and that's Coldplay. They've got a live album, and if you listen to that, swearing all the way through it, but it's fantastic. And if I want to just not focus on anything other than just being energised and staying in that moment and being joyful, I listen to that. I just crank it up. I've got a 50-minute drive home, put it on.
Yeah.
Understand.
So you get the person at the traffic lights that people are sitting there thinking, my God.
It's loud music.
Yeah,
that's me.
Rocking.
That's me.
Yeah.
Always the same piece of music too, always. There you go.
What song do you listen to? Got a favourite Coldplay song?
No, there's a live album that they did. It's a few years old now. It's mainly recorded from Paris, and it's very uplifting for me anyway. Okay. Anything else? Any other joyful moments that we can find? If not, we can add that to your list of homework for next time. I've got another one for you for today. But it's just a good thing to remember, if you can. So we started talking about resilience last meeting, and do you remember we talked about being in the canoe? Do you remember that, being in the canoe and going down the river? And making sure you have the right equipment, and if you've been down the river before, then if you have to experience it again, you know where the skills that you have and what you need to get down the river. So resilience is a similar type of concept. You pre-prepare basically. The more you have, the more pre-knowledge you have in advance of adversity that we all know that we're going to have, the better you will be at managing it. So it's knowing what your skill set is, and knowing the support structures that you've got around you to help you and support you. Does everyone remember that's what we talked about last time? Yeah. I know it's a long time ago, so no. Okay. So, what you need to do is really think about a plan ahead of time. Think about the skills that you have and a strategy, really, I suppose, is what we're after. And sometimes you also need to think about the companion that can help you along the way. So how do you build this? And I think the best thing to think about it is you need to know yourself. You need to know how you're going to respond to circumstances. In case you've mentioned that already, you already know that sometimes that you can. So having an understanding of yourself and what your triggers are, I think really does help you in preparation. So on the sheet that I've handed out for today, if you're aware of your own talents, so there's two bits. There's two bits of building resilience. One is building up your assets, so the things that are going to help you to get through, so the things within yourself and the people around you, your circumstances that can build you up. And the other one is looking at the risk that you have in the circumstance and how you can minimise that. So it's building up your assets and minimising your risks. So the questions you need to ask yourselves are these. What are your immediate thoughts when faced with adversity? So what first comes to your mind when you're faced with a challenge? Is it, oh no, my world is ending? Or is it something else? Sometimes it might be that. And maybe that's genuine. How do you respond? What's your immediate response action? How do you go about assessing the risk? So in assessing the risk, this is what you need to think about. How true, if you start assessing a risk, how true is that risk to you? What is the real impact going to be? What are the range of things that might happen? And what can you do to avoid them? How can you avoid or deal with the initial thoughts so that they don't become the problem? And you need to then focus on those resilient thoughts as well. So we're going to work through a scenario that's pretty much close to what's happened to me. And I think we could spend some time in discussion. And this might be something that resonates with you too. So this is a bit of a modified version, I guess, of what I've been through recently. Today is Thursday. I have a major research project, a 4,000-word essay due next Monday. I have completed draft 1, but it needs referencing, editing, and I have not really completely argued a well-structured, logical paper. I estimate there is about 10 hours work to completion. I plan to spend Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning finishing the work. This will be enough time. So far, so good. On Thursday night, my daughter becomes ill. We take her to emergency on Friday morning. She is sent home because the hospital is too busy to see her. She deteriorates again on Friday during the night, and we go to a different hospital ER. She is admitted on Saturday morning. The doctors say that she'll be in for a few days to conduct some tests. I have an important parent meeting on Monday morning, which I must attend as I'm acting principal. So, that's the scenario. That's the scenario. So let's work through that. How would you approach that? So what would my immediate thoughts be, do you think, if that was you, if you were placed in that circumstance? You can, this piece of paper, and you can jot down your thoughts. What would your immediate thought to that be? What's your immediate thought?
Get an extension.
I'm never going to get it done.
Yeah.
How can you do it all?
So, is that hard to read? So what's your immediate thought to that? Is it panic? Is it my life is
Well, you have
over?
to rethink the whole thing because all of your time allocation has gone out the window.
So you know there are times when you think that you do actually have it all planned out and it's going to go to plan, and then something happens and it hits you sideways, but you also have other responsibilities as well. So in that situation, what is the risk to me? What's the biggest risk?
I think it is panic and then not doing it.
So panic, I think, is probably the first
Yeah.
response, isn't it? Panic. This is, and you can feel it, can't you? We've all been there, where your adrenaline starts going, and you know, the heart palpitations, and you think, oh, this is just, I can't manage this. It's just too big to manage.
You need to prioritise.
Yeah. So if we think about assets and risks, so that's what we're looking at. What are the risks? What is the real risk? If it comes to pass, that what's the highest risk for me in this circumstance?
You're not there for your daughter. You fail as her mum.
Yeah, and her mum. Yep.
You fail your task.
Yep.
And
Your third response, you're not
and
listening.
principles.
Yeah. So possibly in 3 areas of my life, all 3 could be at high risk. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess there's then that concern that people haven't done anything well. All these things matter, but I've been spread too thinly. The pool has been too great.
Yes.
And you try and, rethink, rework times that, maybe there's a sense of being dissatisfied because there are so many larger pools of energy.
So it becomes, I've failed.
Yeah.
I've failed. That's often the first response, isn't
And
it?
there
I've
could
failed.
also be a sense of guilt because if you're there with your daughter, but still in the back of your mind
Yep.
is the thought of that paper.
Yep.
There's that sense of, I shouldn't be thinking about it.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. So, what from the lowest to the highest? Because we've just articulated the worst possible scenarios, that I don't complete the paper, that something is really seriously ill with my daughter, and that I don't complete my obligations as in my role as principal on Monday. That's the worst case scenario. What's the spread though? What are the, on a scale from it's not going to be too bad to what we've just articulated as the worst? And interestingly, that's the first thing you think about, isn't it? We always go to the worst case scenario. But we need to realise that is probably the most unlikely outcome, isn't it? That is the most unlikely. So what's the range of things that could happen in that? What's a low-level risk that I could probably manage?
That she just gets out of hospital and she's fine.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah.
But you sit in hospital all weekend doing work on a laptop while she sleeps blissfully in the bed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That likelihood that it'll be fine and she will recover and things will be okay. Yeah. And then there's no real risk then, apart from the follow-up, I suppose. Bit of risk, but not a high-level risk.
Well, you submit your paper, but it's not the best hope for standard, but you still...
Yep. So a bit of risk, but you get it done, but it may not be to the standard that you're hoping for. Bit of risk, I guess, there.
You get to the parent meeting, but you're probably just not prepared as well as you would have liked. And maybe
And does that really matter? Possibly.
I mean, is this a situation where you could delegate that meeting?
Yeah, and I think that's where you start looking at your resources, don't you? What resources do you have at hand to manage it? Yeah. So
also, in that intense space, it's great if you take just a moment in time to just have that sense of composure now. Who's best to contact? Who is really going to address this? So I don't have to think about it again. You just get that clarity. If you can, that clarity of okay, that can be set aside. I can contact the person. They are reliable, and that can take those weights away.
Yes.
And just do that. Consider thinking.
yes. So knowing who you can use, your personal resources, the people that you can go to, is really important in that, isn't it? And then making sure when you are in adversity that you do go to those, because that's when you really do need them, and not thinking that you actually have to get through this all on your own, that you do draw upon. So what I did have, like that's an exaggerated version of events that did occur, but my personal resources, of course, the rest of my family that I can draw upon. So I'm very blessed that I have a sister who is very, very supportive, so I can always call her, and she would always support and help out where she possibly could. So would my husband, so would my son. So I would call upon them first, knowing that, and I know that not everyone has that, and I understand that I'm very blessed to have that, but I think in points of adversity we do need to call upon the people who we know that we can rely on and who will be there and will help us, because you only do it in extreme circumstances, don't you? You don't do it every day. It's only when it really matters. So I think knowing that. What about my personal resources? What personal resources would I have at my... So I've talked about some of the risk. I know what the worst case scenario is. I know what the lowest case. What else do I have at hand within my own personal resources to manage it?
You should have a sense of, I think, confidence about knowing how you respond to challenging situations in the past, because that gives you a sense of, if I jump all these hurdles in the past, I know I've got the strength to jump the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's experience really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. So that whole idea, I've been down this river before, and I got through it last time, so I'm going to get through it this time. Yep. Very true. Anything else? Any other personal resources that we all have at hand?
I guess an understanding of the physiological aspects of stress, so that, I mean, they were the things that kept us alive. So I guess rather than panic about your beating heart and your breathlessness, recognise that that's your body, you know,
Giving you that.
ready to give you all the energy and the strategies to deal with it. So rather than panicking about, you know, those physiological symptoms, just think, my body's working correctly, it's doing all the things it's supposed to do, I just need to manage to settle it down. I mean, I guess strategies for relaxation, to recognise that you can handle those things.
Yes. And probably, as Kate said, taking that time out, you know how you said before that you would just spend 20 minutes away from everything. That might be a useful thing in this circumstance, to know that if you do that and you've refreshed yourself a bit, you can face it a little bit better. I think that's important.
I think when there's a whole emotional pull there, knowing if you've done it before, that you can find your own time to rejuvenate, to come back to it, and be okay. You'll be right to know. You are ready to go with the time when it's stressed and blubbering, and really lots of things are being done, but you know you've done it before, and you need time to rest, recover, rejuvenate, and move on with it. Just keep going with that. And to think about that as part of your strength as you go. This is kicking out. I know you're right. Put things in place to bring you back to it.
It's not always going to be this way.
No, it'll change.
Yes. It's at the moment that's what it is, but it's not going to be necessarily like that in a week's time. We just have to get through this particular moment and things will get better.
I've also found, which something I've learned, of recent years, is to stop myself. Just say, I'm not going to let myself go down that path of, being panicky or getting upset or whatever. You can actually choose how you're going to control your emotions. And I just say, no, that door's closed. And it's not always going to help, but it actually does make you think. And I think you can actually stop yourself, particularly if you know that you're given to emotional responses to things. I find that sort of sense.
Yes. Yeah. Anything else in there? For me, I know that, and this is different for everyone, but I would know too that I'm not good when I'm very tired, and I don't make good decisions when I'm tired. So I would have to build in, knowing that would be a risk for me, I'd have to build in, even if it meant that I asked, you know, I didn't stay at the hospital and I got someone else to stay at the hospital so I could actually go home and get some sleep, because I'd be no good to anyone if I wasn't functioning well. I couldn't do my job, I wouldn't be able to look up, I wouldn't be able to make decisions, I couldn't get the research task completed. So I know within myself that is a risk for me. Being tired and run down is a risk, and I cannot allow that to happen. I must make sure that I get that good quality sleep and rejuvenation, and then I can function. So having that pre-knowledge of myself, I'd set that up so I had someone to step in to be able to do that, because I think, you know, as women we tend to think that we should be doing everything as well and taking it all on, and sometimes we can't always do that, can we? Okay. So is that helpful to think about how you would go if you were faced with something? You know, we've talked through in a logical way the things that you might do. Obviously, you have to take the time, don't you, to stop and think it through before you start that panic, which is that first response. So after I've gone through that, what should be my response now? I've gone through those processes, I've put things in place, what should be my response now? Thinking I'll be okay. Yeah. I'll get through it. Yep.
Readjust the plan.
Readjust the plan. It's okay. The worst case scenario probably won't happen. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, the likelihood. I know that I'm not going to get the best quality research project in, but that doesn't matter. I'll make it up next time. I'll have the parent meeting and maybe I won't be the best prepared, but it'll be okay because I have the confidence I've done it before. So it really is about rethinking your initial response. So I think that's the job of all of us, really, when we're faced with adversity, to rethink and reframe. Reframing is an important skill. So that's probably the last bit we're going to talk about. We'll come back to resilience, but we'll probably move on to optimism next, I think. But your homework, it's gone off. Your homework for next time will be just sitting in silence for 5 minutes. Find somewhere nice in your day. So 5 minutes in silence each day. Oh my goodness, is that such a hard task?
I do it already.
5 minutes of silence each day. No TV. No reading. Just sitting.
That seems harder than deliberately finding joy.
Are you allowed to drink a glass of wine? Yes. So that 5 minutes count.
5 minutes of breathing.
Yep.
5 minutes of breathing. No.
Yep.
You can think.
Of course, yes.
How can you not think? I find it difficult not to.
All right, well, let's see how you go. That's a challenge. Thank you, everyone.
Is your daughter okay?